The strange thing about funerals isn't the silence. It's what people do inside that silence. 3 days after we buried my father, my family gathered in a quiet lawyer's office to divide his inheritance. The curtains were half closed. Dust floated through thin beams of winter light. Everyone looked exhausted from grief. Everyone except my brother. While the rest of us were still mourning, Daniel sat there in a perfectly pressed black suit, leaning back in his chair like someone waiting for a meeting to begin. And in that moment, I realized some people don't wait for grief to pass. They wait for what comes after. My mother's old rosary beads were wrapped around my wrist, pressing into my skin like a quiet reminder. Stay calm. My older brother Daniel sat across from me, dressed in a sharp black suit that looked more like a victory outfit than funeral attire. His jaw was tight but not with sorrow, with anticipation. The lawyer cleared his throat, papers shuffled, a life reduced to documents. My father had built everything from nothing. A small construction business that turned into contracts across 3 cities. 2 houses, farmland, savings, investments, the kind of story people love to call self-made. But they rarely talk about the cost. The sleepless nights, the arguments at the dinner table, the quiet sacrifice. Experts say inheritance disputes are one of the leading causes of permanent family breakdown. According to estate mediation specialists, nearly 70% of wealthy families lose their unity by the 2nd generation. Not because of money itself, but because of what money represents. Validation, power, love. The lawyer began readings. The house would go to Daniel. The company shares Daniel. The farmland Daniel. The savings account Daniel. There was a pause, a silence that didn't feel accidental. My brother leaned back in his chair, a faint smile touching his lips. That's what Dad wanted, he said, as if delivering a verdict. I looked down at my hands, they were steady. Inside, though, something old was stirring. Not anger, not yet, something colder, something patient. You see, when people hear about inheritance battles, they imagine dramatic courtroom fights and shouting siblings. But the real battles are quieter. They begin years earlier, in hospital rooms, in late-night phone calls, in who shows up and who doesn't. 5 years before that day in the lawyer's office, my father had his first stroke. It was minor, they said, a warning shot, but it changed him. The once loud, commanding man who ran construction sites like a general became forgetful. Softer, slower. Daniel was busy expanding the business, or at least that's what he said. He moved into the big house, took over meetings, started signing documents on behalf of Dad. I moved back home. Not because I had nowhere to go. I had a career in another city, a life. But something about my father's voice on the phone that night, the hesitation, told me he was afraid. Caregiving isn't glamorous. There are no applause lines, just hospital corridors that smell like antiseptic and coffee. Just learning how to measure medication, how to help someone who once carried you learn how to walk steadily again. Over time, I began noticing things. Bank statements arriving addressed to Daniel. Company transfers I didn't understand. New property titles. When I asked, Daniel would wave me off. Dad approved it, it's business, you wouldn't get it. But I did get it. Investigative journalists often talk about the power of paper trails. How lies can sound convincing, but numbers rarely lie. So one night, after my father fell asleep, I opened the old metal filing cabinet in his study. The one he never locked, because he believed in trust more than security. Inside were copies of documents Daniel had him sign during recovery. Contracts transferring majority shares, authorizations, amendments. Some were dated days after his stroke. Medical research shows that cognitive impairment after a stroke can affect judgment, memory, and decision-making for months. Sometimes. I didn't confront Daniel then. I waited. Over the next 2 years, I quietly documented everything. Conversations, dates, financial statements. I consulted a family lawyer not to start a war but to understand my options. He listened carefully and said something that stayed with me. Power taken in silence can only be undone with patience. Meanwhile, my father's health declined. In his final year, there were moments of clarity, flashes of the man he used to be. One afternoon, sitting by the window, he looked at me and asked, "Did I do right by you kids?" I didn't know how to answer. A few weeks before he passed, he asked for a notary to come to the house. Daniel wasn't there that day, he was traveling for business. I was. That afternoon my father dictated something new. Slowly, carefully, his hands trembled but his voice did not. He knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. When the lawyer finished reading the will in that office, Daniel stood up triumphant. "So that's it," he said. "I'll handle the transfers." That's when I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not an angry one, just calm. "Dad," I said softly, almost as if speaking to the empty chair beside me, "don't you know?" The lawyer blinked. "Excuse me." I reached into my bag and placed a sealed envelope on the desk. The notary's seal was still intact. "There's a codicil," I said, "signed and witnessed 3 weeks before he passed." Daniel's confidence cracked for the first time. The lawyer opened it. The room felt smaller. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, but my face remained still. The document revoked all previous transfers made during the period of medical incapacity. It appointed an independent auditor to review the company's restructuring. It divided the estate equally, but with one condition. If any evidence of financial manipulation or coercion was found, the entire operational control of the business would be transferred to me. Silence. Daniel's face drained of color. He tried to argue, said Dad didn't understand what he was signing, but the medical evaluation attached to the codicil stated otherwise. On that day, his cognitive capacity had been formally assessed. Investigations take time. Months, in fact. Auditors combed through records, emails, transfers. The findings weren't dramatic in a cinematic sense. No hidden offshore accounts. No secret mansions. Just a pattern of self-serving decisions made during a vulnerable period. Legally grey, morally darker. In the end, the board voted, control shifted. The house was sold, the assets redistributed. But here's the twist no one talks about in stories like this. Winning didn't feel like victory. Because inheritance isn't just about property, it's about memory, about what we believe we were owed, not in money but in love. Daniel and I haven't spoken in 2 years. Family therapists often say that unresolved sibling rivalry can resurface during inheritance disputes, magnified by grief. It's rarely just about assets. It's about childhood, about who was favored, who felt invisible, who carried the weight quietly. Sometimes I wonder if Daniel believed he deserved it all, if he saw his takeover not as theft but as compensation. And I wonder what my father would think now. The company still runs. I restructured it, brought in transparency, built a scholarship fund in his name for children of construction workers, something he once mentioned but never had time to implement. Every year at the award ceremony, I tell them about a man who believed in building things that last. But I never tell them about the inheritance battle. Because the real lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about the last. That day in the lawyer's office, when my brother claimed it all, I smiled not because I was confident of winning. I smiled because I knew the truth had been given time to breathe. And sometimes that's enough. So if you ever find yourself sitting in a room where it feels like everything has been taken from you, remember this. Power doesn't always belong to the one who speaks first. Sometimes it belongs to the one who waits, and when the moment comes, makes the last move.